In this video, I'm going to break down the editing style of Economics Explained. This video is going to be broken down into 4 parts. In the first part, we're going to cover the basic infographics animation. In the second part, we're going to cover the graphs. In the third part, we're going to cover the article animation. And finally, in the fourth one, we're going to do some motion graphics animation heavy stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, right now over here, as you can see, this is the footage. This is the first footage. So this is what I'm going to show you how to do in this first part. And by the way, one thing that you might notice in the style of editing for this channel is that there is a lot of footage in the background. And then you have these infographics, sometimes graphs, sometimes motion graphics, a little bit of that as well. But mostly it's all about the footage. Right now, as you can see, we have this footage right here. There is a footage and then there is an infographic going on, or you can say this slider. Here we have the video. And by the way, you can download these assets from the link in the description for free. So let's drag in the footage. And this is the footage by Lucian Photography. I found it on Pexels. Now, the next thing that we need is to add the infographics. But for that, we first of all need to go over to this and then go right here in the inspector panel and then change the opacity from 100 to, let's say, 50, or we can even go lower, let's say 30. So I'm going to go over to 30 opacity, and now let's go ahead and drag in our fusion composition right here. All right, so right click and then click on open in fusion page. Let's drag in our background, connect this with the media out. Now right here, I'm just going to change the green and red all the way to 1 so that we have this yellow background. And then you can just drag in this rectangle and connect this with the background. Also, let's go ahead and drag in our text, connect this with the background, and then simply just type in, let's say, GDP or something. And the font that I'm going to use is Montserrat. So let's go with Montserrat at bold. And then for the color, let's go ahead with something like this. All right. Actually, let me just go over at black. And if you want, you can change the size as well. So let me just go with 0.15. And then now let's go over to the rectangle mask that we have right here, and then change the width and also the height so that this covers the text that we have. And now we're going to do the animation. So first of all, we're going to go right here at, let's say, 20. Go over to rectangle and create a keyframe at width and also at height. But now let's go over to 0 and change the width to 0. And right here, let's go over at 40 frames and then also create another keyframe for height. And then right here at 20. So this was supposed to be at 20, but I created this at 21. So if you ever have this problem, you can just go over to keyframes and then simply just go over to this, or you can just click on the zoom to fit and then zoom in by pressing Control and your mouse scroll wheel. All right, so here we are at 20. So let's just move this right here, both of these. Anyways, so now at 20 frames, we're going to change the height as well. So let's go with something like this, 0.008. And this is how it will look. So now how do we reveal the text like they do in the Economics Explained videos? So for this, you can drag in this rectangle again and connect this with the merge one. And now let's simply change this right here. Make sure that this is within the box or within the background that we created. Let's go over at 40. And in the rectangle, let's just create a keyframe at center. Then go over at 20. And let's move this up. And also change the soft edge a little bit. So if you play this, right now this is how it looks. But you also need to go over to the text and go over to layout. And in the center, create a keyframe. And then go over at 20. And simply just move the Y down. And let's do this a little bit more. Let's move this even further down. All right, so this is how it will look. So now you can go ahead over to the rectangle tool and then play around with the soft edge right here. So let's increase this a little bit more. And there you go. Now let's go over to spline and make sure to select all these keyframes. Click on zoom to fit, then select all of them, hit S on the keyboard, and that's it. Now we can go back to the main timeline, and from here we can now position this. So now using the transform right here in the expector panel, we can just go ahead and position this. So let's move this up somewhere around here, and that's it. You can also decrease the size if you want to, but now you can reuse this. So throughout their videos, they have this sort of a text coming in. So now you can use this again and again with different footages if you want. All right. Now the next step is to add in the counter that you saw in the preview. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's drag in another fusion composition. And for example, we're going to start this from right here. When we have this revealed in, now we can extend this, right click, open in Fusion page. Drag in another background, connect this with the media out. And this time let's change the color to white. And now let's also drag in this polygon, connect this with the background. Make sure to unselect the shape animation. And you can just draw a line like this. Unselect the solid and increase the border width, and also make sure to change this to flat. All right, so let's go with 0.03. Actually, let's go with 0.01. And now we can drag in the ellipse. So let's go ahead, connect this ellipse with the polygon. Make sure this is connected with the polygon only. Right click on the width, click on expression, then connect this with the height. And now let's decrease this. And now we can position this right here. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and make multiple copies of these. You can just go ahead, copy this, Control C, Control V, and then keep on adding this. Or another way to do that would be this. So let me just remove this for now. And let's just unselect this. And now let's go ahead, drag in another background, connect this right here, and then connect the ellipse right here. And in the background, let's again go ahead, change the color to white. And now underneath the background, make sure that you click on background and then press Control Space and search for duplicate. And now we can go ahead and change the copies to 5. And now using the center, we can now position this right here. So here you can see, you can do it either way, that's up to you, but I would suggest this is a more faster way. Now the next thing is to add in our text. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead, type in our text, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By the way, in the preview, they had up till 10. So you can go ahead and do that. You can just go over to the duplicate, change this all the way to 10. And using the center, you can then position this on the line, something like this. But I'm just going to go with 5 for now. Now let's go over to the text, move this down. And actually, let's go over to the H anchor and then click on left. Then in the layout, we can change the X right here. Now let's go back to the text and then add spaces. All right, and now let's do the animation. So let's go over at 40. Go over to polygon 1, create a keyframe at length, and then go over at 0, change this to 0. And also in the duplicate, we can go over at 60, create a keyframe at copies, then let's go over at 0 and change this to 0. So if you play this, this is how it will look. Actually, let's go over at 50 and then change this to 5 and remove the keyframe at 60. So from 0 to 50, let's play this. So now this is looking much better. And now how do we highlight this? And actually, let's also add the text as well. So let's go over at 60, create a keyframe, add this right on, and then go over at 0, change this to 0. All right. And again, you can do this at 50 as well. It's up to you. So if you play this, this is how it will look. And also let's go over to shading and then at 50, let's create a keyframe at opacity. Then at 0, let's change this to 0. So this is looking much better now. And how do we highlight this now? So you can just go ahead, drag in this background, connect this right here with the merge. And then in the background, let's change the color to yellow. And now let's go ahead and add in this rectangle, connect this with the merge 3. And then in the merge 3, you can just go over to the apply mode and change this to screen and then change the operator to in. And that's it. Now using the rectangle, just increase the width right here. And then let's go ahead and move this right here. So at 60, let's create a keyframe. Add center. And then let's go over at 100 and then move this in. So now let's go back to the main timeline and see how this looks. So here you can see this is how it looks. By the way, one last thing, you can go over to the spline, select all the keyframes, click on zoom to fit, select all of them and hit S on the keyboard, and that's it. So there you have it. So we have the part 1 done, which was how to make the infographics. Now in the next part, we're going to cover how to make the graphs. Now for the graphs, you will notice that what they usually do is they also have this footage, just like we saw in the previous part. They have these footages and then they have these graphs on top of it. So for this one, we're going to again use our footage. So we can just simply copy the footage right here. And the way you can do that is by simply selecting the footage, press Alt on the keyboard, and using your mouse, just drag this, and you have a copy. So that's it. And now for the graphs, you can simply just add in this Fusion composition, extend it, right click, open in Fusion page, and then let's go ahead, drag in a background, connect this. And also while you have this background selected, press Control Space and search for grid. Now select this grid and this will be added on the timeline. And also in the background, you can go ahead and change the alpha to 0 because we don't need the background. We just need it. We just need the grid. Now select the grid, go over to row cells, change this to 1. And the column cells, let's go ahead, change this to, let's say, 10. And the major line spacing, let's just keep this at 0. And the color, let's go with something like this. And in the zoom, let's decrease this. All right. And now go ahead and drag in this rectangle mask, connect this with the grid. Now change the width so that this is covering everything right here and also the height. But this time we don't need this part right here, the upper part right here. So you can just drag this like this. And also in the grid, you will notice that this line is our x-axis has a more thicker line while the y-axis lines are thin. So what you can do is go over to the horizontal line width, and just decrease this. That's it. Now you will notice, and actually let me just change this to white so that you will notice the difference now. So that's it. And now let's keep this color right here. Now let's go ahead and add in our text, connect this with the grid. And in the text, we can just simply add the numbers. So let me just quickly do that. I'll just go with 200, 150, 100, 50, and 0. And make sure to change the edge anchor to this left. Then move this right here. And let's go ahead, change our text to, let's say, Montserrat. Let's change this to regular. Change the size to, let's say, 0.00, 0.04. And now using the line spacing, we can just position this right here. So something like this. Let's move this right here. All right. Actually, let me just change this to 0.03. And now let's position the line spacing somewhere around here. All right, so this works fine. And now we can do the same thing for the y-axis. So let me just quickly do that. This time you can use the tracking. All right, so we have the graph done. Now we need the line that we need right here. So for this, let's drag in our background, connect this with the merge tool, and then add in this polygon. Unselect any shape animation, then connect this with the background. And also for the background, let's change the color to yellow. And now while you have this polygon selected, you can just go ahead, draw in any sort of line that you want. And that's it. Now you can unselect the solid and change the border width. So something like this. Let me just go with 0.005. All right, so now we can do the animation. Okay, so for the animation, what we can do is let's go over at 20 and make sure you have your rectangle selected. You can create a keyframe at center and also increase the soft edge. Then go over at 0 and using the X, you can just move this right here. All right. And I'll also do the same thing for the text. So for example, let's go over at 5 frames. Then go over at shading, create a keyframe. At opacity, change this to 0. And then go over at, let's say, 10. And then change this to 1. And then from 10, we can go over at shading for the text 2. And do the same thing up till 20. And then right here at 10, we can just change this to 0. So this is how it will look. And then finally for the animation for this line, we can go over at 20. Actually, we can go over at, let's say, 10. Create a keyframe at length, change this to 0. And then at, let's say, 40, let's go ahead and change this to 1. So if you play this, this is how it will look. And now you will notice that we have this dot right here. So to get rid of it, we can just go over at 10, create a keyframe at level, move 1 frame back, and then change the level to 0. So if you play this, this is how it will look. And also, we can add some shade underneath the line. For that, we can just drag in another background, connect this right here. You can just copy the polygon from here, Control C, unselect, and then Control V, and then connect this with the background. And this time, you can just click on solid and make sure to add this line right here as well. So something like this, and now we can just position it. But before we do that, just select these 2 lines right here and then click on this linear, and that's it. Now select this line, move this up on the graph right here. So something like this. And now in the background, let's go over and change the type to gradient. And let's go ahead, move this down, and then move this one up. Let's go ahead and change the color to yellow. Actually, let's switch this. So this one will be yellow, and this one, let's change this to black and then change the alpha to 0. So we can now move this up somewhere around here, and this is how it will look. So if you play this, we also need to animate this. So for that, we can add in this rectangle mask and connect this with the merge 4. And now let's increase the width and the height for now, so that this covers the whole line or the whole highlight, you can say. And now let's do the same thing that we did for polygon 1, which was starting at 10. So let's go ahead, create a keyframe at center in the rectangle 2, but let's move this right here. And then we can go over at, let's say, 50, and then using the X, we can just move this in. So now if you play this, this is how it will look. But of course, if you want to exactly match it, you can just go over at 40 and then move this in. And then you can remove the keyframe from here. And now let's go over to spline. Go ahead, select all the keyframes. Click on zoom to fit, select them and hit S on the keyboard, and that's it. So now we have this nice looking graph. And one last thing, if you want to do it, you can just go ahead, add in a text, and let's just call this graph heading, and let's move this up. So the size will be at 0.05 and I'm using Montserrat at bold. We can now go back to the main timeline and see how this looks. So here you can see. All right, so we have the graph done as well. And also one more thing I would like to do is let's go over to the footage and then change the opacity to 20 this time, because usually in the graph they have a little more lower opacity so that the graph is more visible. So this is it. We have the graph done as well. Now let's move on to the third part, which is going to be the article animation. So you will notice that in most of their article animations, they have this world map in the background and then some animation graphics going on in the background, and then the article itself on front. So we're going to see how to do that. So for this one, we do need the article itself and also the world map. So of course, you will find that from the link in the description. So let's drag in the map right here. And let's go ahead, zoom this in so that this covers the whole screen. And let's go ahead, change the opacity. So let's go with something like 30. All right. And now let's go ahead and add in the fusion composition. So we're going to add two compositions right here. Let's extend both of these. Now in this one, we're going to do the background animations, or you can say the graphical animations that they have in the videos. And then in this one, we're going to do the article animation itself. So let's go ahead and do the first one, which is the graphic elements animations, whatever you want to call it. Let's go ahead, drag in our background, connect this with the media out. And the color I'm going with is going to be yellow. But of course, you can do that later on if you want to. So let me just go ahead, drag in the rectangle mask, connect this with the background. Let's change the width to 0.1 and the height to 0.2. And let's go ahead, make sure the background is selected, press Control Space and search for duplicate. Now in the duplicate, we can go ahead, create 4 copies. You can go ahead and create more copies if you want to. And then go over at jitter. Let's change the center Y and X. All right. And now let's also change this. And you can also change the random seed right here. So let's start with this. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click over here, click on modify width, and then go over to shake. And then if you go over to the modifiers and play this, so right now you will see this is the kind of animation that we're getting. We can of course decrease the smoothness if you want a more fast, rapid pace. But if you want to keep this at smooth, you can just increase the smooth. All right, so this is how it will look. But we do need to do one more thing, which is if you go over to 0, and let's go back to the controls. And from here, we have these copies. So let me go over at 10, create a keyframe at copies, and then go over at 0 and change this to 0. And then right here at 20, we're going to decrease this back to 0. And then at 30, just create another keyframe, and that's it. Now go over to spline, make sure you select the copies, and then select the keyframes. Make sure the random seed is also selected, and then select the keyframes and click on set loop. And if you play this, you will notice that this is how it will look. Now let's go ahead, add in a text, connect this with the duplicate, and let's just go ahead with the plus sign. And you can increase this, move this, let's say somewhere around here. You can change the font if you want to, but you can keep this, that's up to you. And again, the color we're going with is going to be yellow. So for the text, the next thing that we need to do is let's go over at shading. At 0, let's create a keyframe. And then at 5, let's create a keyframe. The one at 0, let's change this opacity to 0. And then at 10, create another keyframe. And then at 15, let's change this to 0. So this is how it will look. And now we can just simply copy this one, copy this text, paste this right here, connect this with the merge one. And then you can just simply change the position for the keyframes by going over to the keyframes and then select the text 1 underscore 1, and then select these keyframes and then just move this right here. And one thing, of course, we need to do is we need to change the position. So for this one, let's move this right here. So now you will notice we have one right here, one right here. And now we can go over to spline, unselect the duplicate for now. Just make sure you have both the text selected. click zoom to fit, select the keyframes, and then click on set loop. And here you go. All right, one more thing, we can go over to the text once again. And using the same settings for the plus sign that we did right here, we can go ahead adding this plus sign, change the color to yellow. And let's go ahead with the duplicate this time. Let's go ahead, change the position right here. In the duplicate, we can just create more copies. So let's say 5. And then using the X at center, we can just move this. And now let's go over to duplicate, add 0. Let's change the copies to 0, create a keyframe. Then let's say add 15, change this back to 5. And then add 30, let's change this back to 0. And then go over to spline, select this duplicate only. So this would be the duplicate 2. Select the keyframes and then click on set loop. And that's it. One final thing we can do is add another background. Add in this rectangle, connect this with the background with the merge 3. Again, we're going to go with yellow color. And then let's change the width and the height. Move this up right here. And again, let's use the same duplicate. So you can just copy this from here, Control C, unselect, and then Control V. And then let's just connect this. So if you play this, right now you will notice that this doesn't look good. So you can just go over to center and position this right here. And of course, if you want to decrease the width and the height, you can also do that. All right, so we have the background animation done. As you can see, this is how it looks. But we do need to add some blur to it. So you can either go over to the composition itself and then right here after the merge, press Control Space, search for blur, or you can just click on this blur and this will get added. Then you can change this right here. And this is how it looks. But another way to do that, let me just show you, is if you go over to the OpenFX right here, you can just add any blur from here. So let's just add a Gaussian blur right here on the map as well, and also on this fusion composition as well. So this is how it will look. And now let's go over to this composition where we will be adding our article. So let's go ahead, add in this article right here. This will be the logo and this will be the article. Of course, you can use any article that you want, but this is what I'm going with. Then let's also add the merge and connect both of them with the merge. And then after the merge, press Control Space, make sure this is selected, and then search for Render 3D. Connect the Render 3D with the media out, and that's it. All right, so let's also position this. So this one, let's go over to the transform using the Y, let's move this down, and then go over to this one, and using the Y, let's move this up. And also you can decrease the size, position this right here, something like this. But you can also go ahead, create a custom article. That's also possible. But I'm just going with the article that I found. Now let's go over to the merge. And from here, let's go over add 10, create a keyframe, add Z, then add 0. Let's decrease this. So this is how it will look. Then also add 10. Let's create a keyframe, add Y, then go all the way to the end. And let's go ahead and change this to, let's say 28. Let's say 15. So this is how it will look. Let's go over to spline. Make sure you select all of these keyframes, select them and hit S on the keyboard, and that's it. Now let's go back to the timeline, and you will notice that we have the article animation done as well. Now for the final part, which is going to be the motion graphics. So let's go ahead and get started. Go over to the effects and drag in a fusion composition. Let's head over to the composition. Let's add in our background, connect this with the media out, and then let's go ahead and add in this paper texture, connect this with the background. Now let's change the angle to 90 and let's cover the whole screen, increase the size. And then right after the merge one, make sure you have this selected, press Control Space and search for stop motion and change this to 10. Then over here in the merge, let's go ahead and change the edges to wrap. Right click on the center, go over to modify width and click on shake. Do the same thing for the angle as well. Then go over to the modifiers and let's go at smoothness, change this to 4, minimum at 0, and then maximum at 360. And let's double click on the center, change the smoothness at 4, minimum at 0, and then maximum at 360. So now you will notice we get this paper based animation. And now let's go ahead and drag in this dots image right after the motion stop motion. Connect this and you will get this merge node. So increase the size from here and also make sure to change the angle to 90 as well for this. Let's increase this, change the apply mode to darken, and you can also change the blend to, let's say, 0.2 or something. And also in the background, let's change this to white, and our merge one, which is the texture, paper texture, we can change the blend mode as well. Something like this, 0.4. And then this one at 0.2. So this looks good. And now we can drag in our image for this factory. Connect this right here. Decrease the size, let's say 0.7. Move this up right here. And then let's add in this truck image. Connect this. Decrease the size. Move this right here. So we're going to start the animation. So make sure you have this merge 4 selected. Go over at 0. Create a keyframe at center. And then let's go over at 30. And move this right here. So let's go over to spline, select the displacement of the merge 4, and then click on the keyframes and hit S on the keyboard. So we have this nice animation. Now let's go ahead and drag in our money image, connect this with the merge 4, and then let's decrease the size of this to, let's say, 0.4, move this right here. And then right here at 35, let's create a keyframe, add blend. Then at 30, let's change this to 0. So this is how it's going to come in. All right. Now let's go ahead, drag in another money image, connect this with the merge 5. While you have this selected, press Ctrl C to copy and then right click on the merge 6 and then click on base settings. So we need the same exact settings right here. And we also need to do this one more time. So let's do that, right click and then base settings. Now while you have this merge 7 selected, let's go over at 40, create a keyframe, and then at 55, let's move this right here. And then at 50, let's create a keyframe at size, and then at 55, let's change this to 0. So if we play this, there you go. And now we're going to do the same thing for merge 6. So right after this, at 55, we're going to create a keyframe for merge 6 at center, and then at 70, let's create a keyframe. At 70, let's go ahead and move this right here. And then again, at 65, let's create a keyframe at size. And then at 70, let's change this to 0. So right now, you will notice we have both the text, both the money images going in. And then finally, for the last one, we already have this at 5. So we can now do that at 70. So let's create a keyframe at center at 70 and then go over at 85 and move this right here. And then at 80, let's create a keyframe at size. And then at 85, let's change this to 0. So there you go. All right. And now right after the merge 7, let's add in this blur node. And then right here at 85, let's create a keyframe, add blur size at 0. And then at 95, let's go ahead and change this to 5. Let's go ahead and drag in this fast noise, connect this with the blur. And let's go over to the color. And in the color tool, let's change this to black. And now let's go back to the noise. And then you can increase the seed from here and the seed rate as well. So something like this would be enough. And then we can drag in this rectangle, connect this with the fast noise, increase the width, simply just move this down and increase the soft edge as well. All right. And now we're just going to enable this. So we can go over to rectangle and then right here at 85, we can create a keyframe at center, and then at 95, we can move this up. So right here at 85, we can just simply move this down, and that's it. Now let's go ahead, add in the image of this person. And also let's go ahead and add in this background, change the color to, let's say, orange, something like this. Add in this ellipse, connect this with the background with the merge 8. And in the ellipse, we can just right click on the width, click on expression, connect this with the height, and let's go with 0.2. Move this right here. And now let's add in this person image. So now we can just position him right here. All right, so right here where we have this coming in at 85, we can go over to the merge 10, create a keyframe. Actually, we need to create a keyframe at, let's say, 100, and then at 85, let's move this right here. So this is how it's going to come in. And now we can do the same thing for the ellipse as well. Create a keyframe at center at 100, and then at 85, let's just move this out. So there you go. And now we need to go over to the spline as well. Make sure we select the ellipse 1 and merge 10. Ellipse 1 and merge 10. Click on zoom to fit and then hit S on the keyboard, and that's it. All right. And now right here after the blur, we can just go ahead and add in this transform node. So make sure you select the blur and then click on the transform. And then right here at 0, let's create a keyframe at size. Let's go all the way to 85 and then change the size to 1.1 so that we can have this zoom in effect going on. And then right here at 95, we can just move this back to 0. All right. And now for the merge 10, which is this image, we can simply just go ahead and create a keyframe at 100 at size. Then let's go all the way to the end and let's just increase this to, let's say, somewhere around here. So if you play this, this is how it looks. And finally, we can add some text at the end. So let's say, let's call this pollution. Let's use Montserrat. Change the color. And let's position this somewhere around here. Let's go with Montserrat Black. Okay, so right here at 100, we can just add this in using the shading. So let's go ahead, change the shading to the opacity to 0. And let's go over at 110. Let's move this in. Of course, you can go ahead, do more animation if you want, but that's pretty much the idea. So this is how you can also create some motion graphics like they do in Economics Explained. So this was it for this video. I hope you found this video useful, and I will see you in the next one.